Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more ancient lore. Today we are diving back into the Divine Comedy. We are going through the descent of Dante Alighieri. I'm sorry if I got the name wrong. In his descent, in his vision of what hell is. I hold some different beliefs. I tend to have some unconventional beliefs, and if you don't know what I mean by that, you should definitely check out my Bible study. So we're looking at this through an entirely different lens than most people do. I don't mean to step on any toes if I do, but we will talk and discuss as we go along. I will read, then we will talk on the backside of it. So if you're not here for the reading, I'm sorry. This is part of my vocal therapy. Part of me being able to strengthen my voice is reading this aloud for you, and I hope you dig it and stick around, but if not, I absolutely understand. We're going to pick up in Canto 7 because we left off in Canto 6. There we found Plutus, the great enemy. Inferno, Canto 7. Pape Satan Elepe. It's important to note that nobody knows exactly what this means. Now, Papa Satan seems like Daddy Satan, right? This is talking about a deity who has been turned into one of the demons, right? This was a Roman deity or a Greek deity, and is turned into one of the demons that guard the circles of hell. So, Pape Satan, Elepe. Thus, Plutus, with his clucking voice, began, and that benignant sage, who all things knew, said to encourage me, Let not thy fear harm thee, for any power that he may have shall not prevent thy going down this crag. Then he turned round unto that bloated lip, and said, Be silent, thou accursed wolf, consume within thyself thine own rage. Not causeless is this journey to the abyss. Thus is it willed on high, where Michael wrought vengeance upon the proud adultery. Even as the sails, inflated by the wind, involved together fall when snaps the mast, so fell the cruel monster to earth. Thus we descended into the fourth chasm, gaining still farther on the dolesome shore, which all the woe of the universe ensacks. Justice of God, who heaps up so many new toils and sufferings as I beheld, and why doth our transgression waste us so? As doth the billow upon Charybdis, that breaks itself on that which it encounters, so here the folk must dance their roundelay. Here saw I people, more than elsewhere, many, one on one side and the other, with great howls rolling weights forward, by main force of chest. They clashed together, and then, at that point, each one turned backwards, rolling retrograde, crying, Why keepest, and why squanderest thou? Thus they returned along the lurid circle, on either hand unto the opposite point, shouting their shameful metre evermore. Then each, when he arrived there, wheeled about, through his half circle to another joust, and I, who had my heart pierced, as it were, exclaimed, My master, now declare to me what these people are, and if all were clerks, these shaven crowns upon the left of us. And he to me, all of them were a squint in intellect in the first life, so much that there with measure they no spending made. Clearly, enough of their voices barked forth whenever they reached the 2 points of the circle, where sunders them the opposite defect. Clerks, those were who no hairy covering have on their head, and popes and cardinals, in whom doth avarice practice its excess. And I, my master, among such as these, I ought forsooth to recognize some few who were infected with these maladies. And he to me, Vain thought thou entertainest, the undiscerning life which made them sordid, now makes them unto all discernment dim. Forever shall they come to these 2 buddings. These from the sepulchre shall rise again, with the fist closed, and these with the tresses shorn, ill given and ill keeping the fair world. Have taken from them and placed them in the scuffle, whatever it be, no words adorn I for it. Now canst thou, son, behold the transient farce of goods that are committed unto fortune, for which the human race each other buffet, for all the gold that is beneath the moon, or ever has been, of these weary souls could never make a single one repose. Master, I said to him, now tell me also, what is this fortune which thou speakest of, that has the world's goods so within its clutches? And he to me, O creatures imbecile, what ignorance is this which doth beset you? Now will I have to learn thee my judgment of her? He whose omniscience everything transcends, the heavens created and gave who should guide them, that every part to every part may shine, distributing the light in equal measure, he in like manner to the mundane splendors ordained a general mistress and guide, that she might change at times the empty treasures, from race to race, from one blood to another, beyond resistance of all human wisdom. Therefore one people triumphs and another languishes in pursuance of her judgment, which hidden is, as in the grass, a serpent. Your knowledge has no counterstand against her. She makes provision, judges and pursues. Her governance as theirs the other gods. Her permutations have not any truce. Necessity makes her precipitate. So often cometh who his turn obtains. And this is she who is crucified, who is so crucified, even by those who ought give her praise, giving her blame amiss and bad repute. But she is blissful, and she hears it not. Among the other primal creatures, gladsome, she turns her sphere, and blissful, she rejoices. Let us descend now unto greater woe. Already sinks each star that was ascending, when I set out, and loitering is forbidden. We cross the circle to the other bank, near to a fount that boils, and pours itself along a gully that runs out of it. The water was more sombre far than purse, and we, in company of the dusky waves, made entrance downward by a path uncouth. A marsh it makes, which has the name of Styx, this tristful brooklet, when it has descended down to the foot of the malign grey shores. And I, who stood intent upon beholding, saw people, mud besprent in that lagoon, all of them naked and with angry look. They smote each other, not alone with hands, but with the head and with the breast and feet, tearing each other piecemeal with their teeth. Said the good master, Son, thou now beholdest the souls of those whom anger overcame, and likewise I would have thee know for certain, beneath the water people are who sigh, and make this water bubble at the surface, as the eye tells thee wheresoever it turns. Fixed in the mire, they say, we sullen were, in the sweet air, which by the sun is gladdened, bearing within ourselves the sluggish reek. Now we are sullen in this sable mire. This hymn do they keep gurgling in their throats, for with unbroken words they cannot say it. Thus we went circling around the filthy fen, the great arc twixt the dry bank and the swamp, with eyes turned to those who gorge the mire. Unto the foot of a tower we came at last. And so we get three more levels of hell here, right? We get the hell of the people who didn't spend money. They were miserly and instead hoarded their riches here, which is interesting. We get the people who succumbed to anger, which is expected, and we get the people who succumbed to the doldrums, to choosing depression. We talk all the time about that, right? That is who this last group was described as. Now, we are meant to seek balance in our life. The balance between poverty and richness is the difference between greed and charity, right? That is the virtue and the vice. Charity being the virtue and vice being greed. And we're supposed to meet in the middle of that. You're supposed to be diligent in your efforts. Expect payment for them. Give a full work for a full payment. Do exactly what you're supposed to do and more. Exceed the expectations of the person who is paying you. That is on the greed side of things, right? That is, and you're supposed to be charitable. You're supposed to meet your needs first and foremost. That is the point, right? But then you are supposed to give away. You're not supposed to hoard it into the future because a certain amount of caution is warranted, always. But if you are one of those type of people, it's like the end of the world is coming. Let me hoard this food. I have 10 years worth of food stored up, and you're doing it wrong. You're doing life wrong. You're on the wrong side of the scale. You need to balance your life. Every single thing in your life needs to be balanced. That is true for greed and charity, right? You're supposed to be in the middle. You're supposed to make money and you're supposed to give some away, but not all of it. It is true for love and wrath, which are the two poles next discussed. Anger and wrath are not quite the same, right? Anger is the feeling. Anger is what you and wrath is the action that comes out from it. Love is the opposite end of that, right? Anger or wrath is love unrequited, relinquished. And so it is the giving up on the love that causes the anger, the betrayal of the expectation that you placed upon the love that causes the anger. You are meant to feel anger. You are meant to be wrathful on occasion. But you are meant to extend love. And you are meant to be accepting most of the time. That is the balance. There is a time for anger, up to and including the destruction of the threat. But if there is no active threat, then you're not called to destroy anything. The balance is what life is about. The balance is what is described here. Inside of this verse, they break apart Christianity as it's known today, for sure. This is the 13th century. That was a long time ago. That was almost 1,000 years ago. Well, not. I guess we won't get that hyperbolic, but 800 years. And so, this was a long time ago. Christianity has evolved greatly in many ways over the years, but it's told to you in here that in this circle of hell are popes, cardinals, and bishops because they did not give away the wealth, but instead hoarded it. Did that change in the last 1,000 years? Not really. The Catholic Church is a great charitable organization. Don't get me wrong. They do a lot of good in the world despite their intentions. I hold a lot of bitter avarice. I have a lot of trouble with the Catholic Church for a variety of reasons, and not the least of which is their hoardings. The things that we do not officially know about but have been talked about, the massive accumulation of wealth over the many generations that they held absolute sway over several continents, the stripping away of natural beliefs and rights from many of people at the point of a sword, because that is the best way to spread your religion, is by threatening to cut off somebody's head if they disagree with you or catch them on fire. That is absolutely the best way to convince somebody that your side is the correct one. But it's telling you here that the popes and the bishops and the cardinals are here because they were greedy. That goes against a lot of Christian doctrine about salvation. Now, at this point in time, we were a long way away from the Reformation, so it was believed that those people could write you a ticket to get out of hell, and yet here they are in hell for doing things. That is an important thing to notice, and I am sure it probably gets overlooked a good bit, but that is definitely something to notice. And the last part, these people who are in the sea, right? We talk an awful lot about your mindset, about the power of perspective. I got a video on that. A lot of people are out here choosing to be depressed. They are choosing to be anxious, and they don't want to hear that. But if you were going back and you were picking up a problem that you put down, then you're choosing to pick up that problem. If 6 months ago or a year ago you were broken up with and you were still tied up behind that, there's a problem. Now, the problem might be that you did something wrong and therefore you can't let go of it. It might be that they did something wrong and you want to forgive them for that. There's a whole variety of reasons why you don't let go of things, but if you have to go back and look for a reason to be sad, you are choosing to be sad. If you have to go and seek out a reason to be anxious, then you are choosing to be anxious. Being anxious because you are behind on your bills is a very real thing. But if you're paid up on your bills and you're worrying that soon you might not be able to pay your bills, then there's a problem right there. You're not balanced. You're choosing anxiety. These people that are being described right here, these melancholy people who stay that way, they're choosing that. And so they are choosing their existence in hell because they are comfortable with that. They're screaming and moaning and crying about things that have no real bearing on anything anymore. It is the exact same in real life. Like, I talk all the times about medicines being stopgaps, and that is true. There are times when medicine can help you, but if you are on an antidepressant for over 2 years, your doctor is probably not got your best interest in mind, and that's just my humble opinion, but you can take from it what you will. All right, that was a rather long discourse right there, so we're going to dive into 8. This is Inferno, Canto 8. I say, continuing, that long before we to the foot of that high tower had come, our eyes went upward to the summit of it. By reason of 2 flamelets we saw placed there, and from afar another answer them, so far that hardly could the eye attain it. And to the sea of all discernment turned, I said, what saith this, and what respondeth? That other fire? And who are they that made it? And he to me, across the turbid waves, what is expected thou canst now discern, if reek of morass conceal it not. Cord never shot an arrow from itself that sped away athwart the air so swift as I beheld a very little boat come over the water towards us in that moment, under the guidance of a single pilot. We shouted, Now art thou arrived, fell soul. Feligius, Feligius, thou criest out in vain. For this once, said my lord, thou shalt not have us longer than in the passing of the slough. As he who listens to some great deceit that has been done to him and then resents it, such became Feligius in his gathered wrath. My guide descended down into the boat, and then he made me enter after him, and only when I entered seemed it laden. Soon as the guide and I were in the boat, the antique prow goes on its way, dividing more of the water than 'tis wont with others. While we were running through the dead canal, uprose in front of me one full of mire, and said, Who art thou that comest here the hour? And I to him, Although I come, I stay not. But who art thou that hast become so squalid? Thou seest that I am one who weeps, he answered. And I to him, With weeping and with wailing, thou spirit maledict, do thou remain? For thee I know, for thou art all defiled. Then stretched he both his hands unto the boat, whereat my wary master thrust him back, saying, Away there with the other dogs. Thereafter with his arms he clasped my neck, he kissed my face, and said, Disdainful soul, blessed be she who bore thee in her bosom. That was an arrogant person in the world, goodness is none, that decks in his memory. So, likewise, here his shade is furious. How many are esteemed great kings up there, who here shall be like unto swine in mire, leaving behind them horrible dispraises? And I, my master, much should I be pleased if I could see him soused into this broth before we issue out of the lake. And he to me, Ere unto thee the shore revealed itself, thou shalt be satisfied. Such a desire 'tis meet thou shouldst enjoy. A little after that I saw such havoc made of him by the people of the mire that still I praise and thank my God for it. All were shouting at Filippo Argenti, and that exasperate spirit Florentine turned around upon himself with his own teeth. We left him there, and more of him I tell not, but on mine ears there smote a lamentation, whence forward I intent unbar mine eyes. And the good master said, Even now, my son, the city draweth near, whose name is Dis, with the grave citizens, with the great throng. and I, its mosques already master clearly. Within there in the valley I discern vermilion, as if issuing from the fire. They were, he said to me, and he to me. From the fire they were, and he to me. The fire eternal that kindles them within, makes them look red, and thou beholdest in this nether hell. Then we arrived with the moats profound, that circumvallate that disconsolate city. Circumvallate that disconsolate city. The walls appeared to me to be of iron. Not without making first a circuit wide, we came into a place where loud the pilot cried out to us, "Debark, here is the entrance." More than 1,000 at the gates I saw, out of the heavens rained down, who angrily were saying, "Who is this that without death goes through the kingdom of the people dead?" And my sagacious master made a sign of wishing secretly to speak with them. A little then they quelled their great disdain, and said, "Come thou alone, and he begone who has boldly entered these dominions. Let him return alone by his mad road, try if he can, for thou shalt here remain, who has escorted him through such dark regions." Think, reader, if I was discomforted at utterance of these accursed words, for never to return here I believed. O my dear guide, who more than 7 times has rendered me security and drawn me from imminent peril that before me stood, do not desert me, said I, thus undone. And if the going farther be denied us, let us retrace our steps together swiftly. And that Lord who had led me thitherward said unto me, Fear not, because our passage none can take from us, it by such is given. But here await me in thy weary spirit, comfort and nourish with a better hope, for in this nether world I will not leave thee. So onward goes, and there abandons me my Father, sweet, and I remain in doubt, for no and yes within my head contend. I could not hear what he proposed to them, but with them there he did not linger long, ere each within rivalry ran back. They closed the portals, those our adversaries, on my lord's breast, who had remained without, and returned to me with footsteps far between. His eyes cast down, his forehead shorn, had he of all its boldness, and he said, with sighs, Who has denied to me the dolesome houses? And unto me, Thou, because I am angry. Fear not, for I will conquer in the trial whatever for deference within be planned. This arrogance of theirs is nothing new, for once they used it at a less secret gate, which finds itself without a fastening still. Over it didst thou behold the dead inscription, and now this side of it descends the steep, passing across the circles without escort, one by whom means the city shall be opened. Okay, and so that ends that one, and that's an interesting one. There's not a whole lot in that to really dissect, right? He crosses over, and he's met with great opposition by people who are mad that he is there because he is alive, and there's an attempt to separate him from his guide, which appears to not be successful, but I do know that when we get to the second part, there's a whole new guide, so at some point he does get to, but at this point, it appears that he's going to stick around, that he's saddened that they can't go into this place, right? But for the most part, this was just a description of the one person in the sadness part of the ocean that he knew, right? And trying to break free from that, which he did, and then they reached the shore on the other side, and then we get to this area. So we're going to see what the next canto holds and go from there. All right, Canto 9. That hue which cowardice brought out on me, beholding my conductor backward turn, sooner repressed within him his new color. He stopped, attentive, like a man who listens, because the eye could not conduct him far through the black air and through the heavy fog. Still, it behoveth us to win the fight, began he, else such offered us herself, and how I long that some one here arrive. Well, I perceived, as soon as the beginning, he covered up with what came afterwards, that they were words quite different from the first. But none the less his saying gave me fear, because I carried out the broken phrase, perhaps to a worse meaning than he had. Into this bottom of the doleful conch doth any ever descend from the first grade, which for its pain has only hope cut off? This question put I, and he answered me. Seldom it comes to pass that one of us maketh the journey upon which I go. True is it once before I here below was conjured by that pitiless Erichthko, who summoned back the shades unto their bodies. Naked of me short while the flesh had been, before within that wall she made me enter, to bring a spirit from the circle of Judas. That is the lowest region and the darkest, and farthest from the heaven which circles all. Well know I the way, therefore be reassured. This fen, which a prodigious stench exhales, encompasses about the city to Lent, where now we cannot enter without anger. And more he said it, but not in mind I have it, because mine eye had altogether drawn me towards the high tower with the red flaming summit, where in a moment saw I swift uprisen the three infernal furies stained with blood, who had the limbs of women and their men, and with the greenest hydras were begirt small serpents, and sarrost were their tresses, wherewith their horrid temples were entwined. And he, who well the handmaids of the queen of ever lamentation knew, said unto me, Behold, the fairest Berenice. This is Megara, on the left-hand side, she who is weeping, on the right, Alecto, Tisiphone in between, and then was silent. Each one her breast was rending with her nails. They beat them with their palms, and cried so loud that I, for dread, pressed close unto the poet. Medusa, come, so we to stone will change him. All shouted, looking down. In evil hour avenged we not on Theseus his assault. Turn thyself around, and keep thine eyes close shut, for if the Gorgon appear, and thou shouldst see it, no more returning upward would there be. Thus said the master, and he turned me round himself, and trusted not unto my hands, so far as not to blind me with his own. O ye who have undistempered intellects, observe the doctrine that conceals itself beneath the veil of the mysterious verses. And now there came across the turbid waves the clangor of a sound with terror fraught, because of which both of the margins trembled. Not otherwise it was than of a wind, impetuous on account of adverse heats, that smites the forest, and without restraint. The branches rend, beats down, and he bears away. Right onward, laden with dust, it goes superb, and puts to flight the wild beast and the shepherds. Mine eyes he loosed, and said, Direct the nerve of vision now along that ancient foam, there, yonder, where that smoke is most intense. Even as the frogs before the hostile serpent across the water scatter all abroad, until each one is huddled in the earth. More than 1,000 ruined souls I saw, thus fleeing from before one who on foot was passing over the Styx with souls unwed. From off his face he fanned that unctuous air, waving his left hand oft in front of him, and only with that anguish seemed he weary. Well I perceived one sent from heaven was he, and to the master turned, and he made sign that I should quiet stand and bow before him. Ah, how disdainful he appeared to me! He reached the gate, and with a little rod he opened it, for there was no resistance. O banished out of heaven, people despised! Thus he began with the horrid threshold. Whence is this arrogance within you couched? Wherefore recalitrate against that will from which the end can never be cut off, and which has many times increased your pain? What helpeth it to butt against the fates? your Cerberus, if you remember well, for that still bears his chin and gullet peeled. And he returned along the miry road, and spake no word to us, but had the look of one whom other care constrains and goads, than that of him who in his presence is, and we, our feet directed toward the city, and after those holy words, all confident. Within, we entered without any contest, and I, whose inclination had to see what the conditions such a fortress holds, soon as I was within, cast round mine eye, and see on every hand an ample plain, full of distress and torment terrible, even at Arles, where stagnant grows the Rhone, even at Pola, near to Quarno, that shuts in Italy and bathes its borders. The sepulchres make all the place uneven, so likewise did they there on every side, saving that there the manner was more bitter. For flames between the sepulchres were scattered, by which they so intensely heated were, that iron more so asked not any art. All of their coverings uplifted were, and from them issued forth such dire laments. Soothe seemed they of the wretched and tormented. And I, my master, what are all those people who, having sepulture within those tombs, make themselves audible by doleful sighs? And he said to me, here are the heresiarchs, with all their disciples of all sects, and much more than thou thinkest laden are the tombs. Here, like together, with its like is buried, and more and less the monuments are heated. And when he to the right had turned, we passed, between the torments and high parapets. And so ends Canto 9. And this is another strange one, right? Now, I want to point out something here that most people don't pay attention to, and it's something that is brought out here. They say that the deepest circle of hell is hell for Judas, because he was the betrayer, right? That is what happened. But did he? What was Judas's purpose? What was Judas's plan? What was the point of Judas being a disciple? Because if it was not for Judas, then there would have been no capture, there would have been no interrogation, there would have been no torture, and there would have been no crucifixion. So without Judas fulfilling his destiny in the way that he was supposed to, then you got a serious problem. And so there's a problem, right? I don't believe current interpretations of things. I have spent an enormous amount of time talking about why, but a lot of them don't make sense. And one of them that doesn't make sense for me is summed up in Judas. Judas was expecting something, and I don't try to put, like, there's a real tendency these days to humanize villainy, right? I don't see Judas really as being a villain. Jesus told him that the one I dip my hand into, it's the one that's going to do. Right? And so they did. They dipped together. Everybody knew who it was going to be. Judas knew what the problem was going to be. Jesus knew what the problem was going to be. And told him, go do it. And so you run into the problem of how are you condemned for fulfilling your destiny? Now, I don't necessarily believe that things went down the way that they are recorded in that book. I have talked about that quite extensively. And so I know that this is just a little bit silly, right? It's silly in the way that if you don't think deeply about it, then it makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, Judas was a terrible person and he did this terrible thing and he deserves to be in the worst part of hell. And then if you do think about it a little bit, then it gets a little bit morally ambiguous, right? You're like, well, maybe he wasn't that bad. What it breaks down to for me is it is silly in the same way that believing that God is restricted from forgiving you for your sins unless you accept the sacrifice of this one particular person who died on this one particular day. Unless you believe that there was a death, a burial, a resurrection, then you're not saved, right? That's true for a large chunk of Christianity. Not everybody, but for the most part, that is Christianity summed up. If you believe in the death, birth, and resurrection of Jesus, then that's you. You're washed in the blood and all of those things. But I find it hard, right? It is hard to limit my God in that way. To say that if I went and truly repented, if I went and told God, Lord, I am a sinner and I ask you to forgive my sins, I freely accept the grace that you freely extended, and I ask you to change my life, it's hard for me to accept that if I say that prayer, it's not done. Because I know that it is. I know that all that God ever required for you to be forgiven from your sin was for you to give up your sin, to sacrifice your sin, not another person, not another goat, not anything. And so it's I don't like using the word silly, but there's no other way for me to say it. Like, you're going to tell me that God is restricted from forgiving you when you ask for it unless you do this one particular thing, right? Unless you kill a goat before 2,000 years ago, or unless you accept that this man died and was resurrected for you from 2,000 years ago till to now. I don't believe that. I believe that God will forgive you by himself with no intermediary necessary and for absolute certainty without having to kill anything other than sin in your life. Some of this is a little bit like it takes more than a single reading through to understand all of it, though, right? There's words here that I need to look up. This heresy arc, I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds like heresy, so I'm going to go with that. Which is deviation from the proper doctrine. Well, guess what? That is most of humanity, regardless of what doctrine you in particular think is the correct one. Most of humanity does not agree with you. They don't agree with me for damn sure, but they don't agree with you either. Regardless of which particular one you pick, there is a large chunk of humanity that will absolutely disagree with you. So they are all heretics, every one of them, and they are all condemned to this level of hell for all of eternity because they believed in God, but not in the correct way. They lived moral lives. They did correct things. They asked for forgiveness from God, but they didn't accept the sacrifice. So, too bad. It's just a little bit silly to me. Inferno, Canto 10. Now onward goes along a narrow path, between the torments and the city wall, my master, and I follow at his back. O power supreme that through these impious circles turnest me, I began, and pleasest thee, speak to me and my longings satisfy. The people who are lying in these tombs, might they be seen? Already are uplifted the covers all, and no one keepeth guard. And he to me, they will all be closed up when from Jehoshaphat they shall return, here with the bodies they have left above. Their cemetery have upon this side with Epicurus and all his followers, who with the body mortal make the soul. But in the question thou dost put to me, wherein within here shalt thou soon be satisfied, and likewise in the wish thou keepest silent. And I, good leader, I but keep concealed from thee my heart, that I may speak the less, nor only now hast thou thereto disposed me. O Tuscan, thou who through the city of fire goest alive, thou speaking modestly be pleased to stay thy footsteps in this place. Thy mode of speaking makes thee manifest, a native of that noble fatherland to which perhaps I too molestful was. Upon a sudden issued forth this sound from out of the tombs, wherefore I pressed, fearing a little nearer to my leader, and unto me he said, Turn thee, what dost thou? Behold, there fair Anata, who has risen, from the waist upward wholly shalt thou see him. I had already fixed mine eyes on his, and he uprose erect with breast and front, even as if hell he had in great despite. And with courageous hands and prompt, my leader thrust me between the sepulchres towards him, exclaiming, Let thy words explicit be. As soon as I was at the foot of his tomb, somewhat he eyed me, and, as if disdainful, then asked of me, Who were thine ancestors? I, who desirous of obeying was, concealed it not, but revealed to him, whereat he raised his brows a little upward. Then he said, Fiercely adverse have they been to me, and to my fathers and my party, so that too several times I scattered them. If they were banished, they returned on all sides. I answered him the first time and the second, but yours have not acquired that art aright. Then there uprose upon the sight, uncovered, down to the chin, a shadow at his side. I think that he had risen on his knees. Round me he gazed, as if solicitude. He had to see if someone else were with me, but after his suspicion was all spent, weeping, he said to me, If through this blind prison thou goest by loftiness of genius, where is my son, and why is he not with thee? And I to him, I come not of myself. He who is waiting yonder leads me here, whom in disdain perhaps your Guido had. His language and the mode of punishment already unto me had read his name. On that account my answer was so full. Up, starting suddenly, he cried out, How, sayest thou, he had? Is he not still alive? Does not the sweet light strike upon his eyes? When he became aware of some delay, which I before my answer made, supine, he fell again. Supine he fell again, and forth appeared no more. But the other, magnanimous, at whose desire I had remained, did not his aspect change, neither his neck he moved, nor bent his side. And if, continuing his first discourse, they have that art, he said, not learned to write, that more tormenteth me than doth this bed. But 50 times shall not rekindled be the countenance of the lady who reigns here, ere thou shalt know how heavy is that art. And as thou wouldst to the sweet world return, say why that people is so pitiless against my race in each of its laws. Whence I to him, the slaughter and great carnage which have with crimson stained the Arabia cause such orisons in our temple to be made. After his head he with a sigh had shaken. There I was not alone, he said, nor surely without a cause had with the others moved. But there I was alone, where every one consented to the laying waste of Florence, he who defended her with open face. Ah, so hereafter may your seed repose. I him entreated. Solve for me that knot which has entangled my conceptions here. It seems that you can see, if I hear rightly, beforehand whatsoever time brings with it, and in the present have another mode. We see like those who have imperfect sight, the things, he said, that distant are from us. So much still shines on us the sovereign ruler. When they draw near or are, is wholly vain, our intellect, and if none bring it to us, not anything know we of your human state. Whence thou canst understand that wholly dead will be our knowledge from the moment when the portal of the future shall be closed. Then I, as if compunctious for my fault, said, Now then, you will tell that the fallen one, that still his son is with the living joined. And if, just now, in answering I was dumb, telling I did it because I was thinking already of the error, you have solved me. And now my master was recalling me, wherefore more eagerly I prayed the spirit, that he would tell me who was with him there. He said, With more than 1,000 here I lie. Within here is the second Frederick, and the cardinal, and of the rest I speak not. Thereon he hid himself, and I, towards the ancient poet, turned my steps, reflecting upon that saying which seemed hostile to me, He moved along, and afterward, thus going, he said to me, Why art thou so bewildered? And I, in his inquiry, satisfied him. Let memory preserve what thou hast heard against thyself. That sage commanded me. And now attend here. And he raised his finger. When thou shalt be before the radiant sweet of her whose beauteous eyes all things behold, from her thou wilt know the journey of thy life. Unto the left hand, then, he turned his feet. We left the wall and went towards the middle, along a path that strikes into a valley, which even up there, unpleasant, made its stench. And so ends Canto 10. And this one is kind of personal to him, right? There is some revelation of who the person might be, but for the most part, he was operating off the understanding that you would know already, right? We have a tendency as humanity to think that other people have the knowledge that we have. It is something that we have to actively work against. You believe other people work as hard as you do. You believe other people hold your values. You believe that other people believe the same things you do, and some do, but some don't. We believe that people know the things that we know, and that is a bigger problem because most of the time they don't, right? You absolutely know of things that have happened that I don't, and I absolutely know of things that have happened that you don't. But if we assume that everybody else understands the things, then parts get lost in translation and don't really make sense. That's a lot of what happened here, right? The first part of this, he assumes that you know who these people are that he is referencing, even though he doesn't give them names. That is somewhat of a problem. It's not a problem if you are repeatedly reading this. I'm not going to, right? I'm not going to read this again and again. I'm not going to pick it apart in the way that I have picked apart through the Bible, for instance, or other things, because again, it's good to know. It's good to see the perspectives. It's wonderful to explore and to have discussions about, but I don't believe these things. I don't believe that Dante, I believe that he had a vision. I do, but I believe that visions are limited by the scope of your own understanding, and that includes the ones that I have. I don't try to say that I got some gigantic divine type of knowledge that is going to condemn or save the earth, because it's up to my interpretation whether or not it even happened and whether or not it is real and all of these things. And so it can be real for him and not be real. You are limited by the scope of your knowledge, the things that you know or what you're responsible for, right? The levels of responsibility are there. This was a level of responsibility of Catholicism in 1300. It is completely different, even from Catholicism today, much less from any of the Protestantism. These 7 layers of hell is not biblical in any way. It is not. Here's the thing for you. There is no hell in the Old Testament. At all. There is no eternal damnation. There is no eternal punishment at all for the mortal soul in the Old Testament. That is not a thing. It was not even a concept until much closer to the New Testament than any of the books of the Old Testament. Jesus was interpreting through the lens of his understanding of the culture around him and the time period that he was in when hell was becoming a concept. And so that is why it stuck around. Not because it was an ancient thing that people thought. There was Sheol, which was where all of the souls went, and there was no real clear definition of what happened there. It was just a kind of a different thing that nobody really understood. There was no eternal damnation. There was no eternal salvation. That was not how the Old Testament was written. And so all of this entire journey is completely outside of the bounds of any of the scripture. None of this fits with any of the scripture in any way, shape, or form. But people have formed beliefs behind this. They firmly believe that there are 7 circles in hell. There are 7 circles of perdition, or whatever the next one is. And then there's 7 levels of heaven, and that's just not biblical. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time breaking down the history contained in this. There is history in here. There are things that we should know. I am sure this is something that was not only well known, but vitally important in history. And we just not explained. Inferno, Canto 11. Upon the margin of a lofty bank with which great rocks, broken in a circle made, we came upon a still more cruel throng, and there, by reason of the horrible excess of stench, the deep abyss throws out, we drew ourselves aside behind the cover of a great tomb, whereupon I saw a writing which said, Pope Anastasius I hold, whom out of the right way Fontius drew. Slow it behoveth our descent to be, so that the sense be first a little used, till the sad blast, and then we shall not heed it. The master thus, and unto him I said, some compensation find, that the time pass not idly. And he, thou seest I think of that? My son, upon the inside of these rocks, began he then to say, are 3 small circles, from grade to grade like those which thou art leaving, but all are full of spirits maledict. But that hereafter sight alone suffice thee. Hear how and wherefore they are in constraint. Of every malice that wins hate in heaven, injury is the end, and all such end either by force or fraud afflictive others. But because fraud is man's peculiar vice, more it displeases God, and so stand lowest the fraudulent, and greater dole assail them. All the first circle is of the violent is, but since force may be used against 3 persons in 3 rounds, 'tis divided and constructed. To God, to ourselves, and to our neighbor, can we use force? I say on them and on their things, as thou shalt hear with reason manifest. A death by violence and painful wounds are to our neighbor given in his substance ruin and arson and injurious levies. Whence homicides and he who smites unjustly, marauders and freebooters, the first round tormenteth all in companies diverse. Man lay down violent hands upon himself and his own goods, and therefore in the second round must perforce without avail repent, whoever of your world deprives himself, who games and dissipates his property, and weepeth there where he should jocund be. Violence can be done to the deity, in heart denying and blaspheming him, and by disdaining nature and her bounty. And for this reason doth the smallest round seal with its signet Sodom and Cahors, and who, disdaining God, speaks from the heart. Fraud, wherewithal is every conscience stung, a man who may practice upon him who trusts, and him who doth no confidence imburse. This latter mode, it would appear, dissevers only the bonds of love which nature makes. Wherefore the second circle nestle hypocrisy, flattery, and who deal in magic, falsification, theft, and simony, panderers and barrators, and the like filth. By the other mode, forgotten is that love which nature makes, and what is after added, from which there is a special faith engendered. Hence, in the smallest circle, where the point is of the universe, upon which this is seated, whoever betrays forever is consumed. And I, my master, clear enough proceeds thy reasoning, and full well distinguishes this cavern and the people who possess it. But tell me, those within the fat lagoon, whom the wind drives, and whom the rain doth beat, and who encounter with such bitter tongues, wherefore are they inside the red city not punished, if God has them in his wrath? And if he has not, wherefore in such fashion? And unto me he said, Why wanders so thine intellect from that which is wont? Or sooth thy mind where it is it elsewhere looking? Hast thou no recollection of those words, which with thine ethics thoroughly discusses the dispositions 3, that heaven abides not, incontinence and malice and insane bestiality, and how incontinence less God offendeth and less blame attracts. If thou regardest this conclusion well, and to thy mind recallest who they are that up outside are undergoing penance, clearly wilt thou perceive why from these felons they separated are, and why less wroth the justice divine doth smite them with its hammer. O Son, that healest all distempered vision, thou dost content me so when thou resolvest that doubting pleaseth me no less than knowing. Once more a little backward turn thee, said I, there where thou sayest that usury offends goodness divine, and disengage the knot. Philosophy, he said, to him who heeds it, notteth not only in one place alone, after what manner nature takes her course from intellect divine and from its art. And if physics carefully thou notest, after not many pages shalt thou find that this your art as far as possible follows, as the disciple does the master, so that your art is, as it were, God's grandchild. From these two, if thou bringest to thy mind Genesis at the beginning, it behooves mankind to gain their life and to advance. And since the usurer takes another way, nature herself and in her follower disdains he, for elsewhere he puts his hope. But follow now, as I would fain go on, for quivering are the fishes on the horizon, and the wane wholly over Chorus lies, and far beyond there we descend the crag. And so ends Canto 11. And there again, there's not a whole lot here for me to talk about, right? It appears that we are entering into the purgatory part, right? They're doing penance, which at least implies the ability to pay off the debt. Now, I don't, again, believe in that. I don't believe in any of the circles, so it's not really something that I feel like even breaking down. We've hit on the major points of it already. It's good to have the knowledge of where they were coming from, but it's not necessarily something to base a faith upon, right? Canto 12, which will probably be the last one for today. The place where to descend the bank we came was alpine, and from what was there, moreover, of such a kind that every eye would shun it. Such as that ruin is which in the flank smote at the side of Trent, the adage, either by earthquake or by failing stay. For from the mountain's top from which it moved unto the plain the cliff is shattered so. Some path 'twould give to him who was above. Even such was the descent of that ravine, and on the border of the broken chasm the infamy of Crete was stretched along, who was conceived in the fictitious cow, and when he beheld us he bit himself, even as one whom anger racks within. My sage toward him shouted, Peradventure, do you think that there might be the Duke of Athens, who in the world above brought death to thee? Get thee gone, beast, for this one cometh none, instructed by thy sister, but he comes in order to behold your punishments, as is that bull who breaks loose at the moment in which he has received the mortal blow, who cannot walk, but staggers here and there. The Minotaur beheld I do the like, and he, the wary, cried, Run to the passage, while he wroth, till 'tis well thou shouldst descend. Thus down we took our way o'er that discharge of stones which oft times did move themselves beneath my feet from the unwonted burden. Thoughtful I went, and he said, Thou art thinking perhaps upon this ruin which is guarded by that brute anger which just now I quenched. Now will I have thee know, the other time I here descended to the nether hell, this precipice had not yet fallen down. But truly, if I well discern, a little before his coming, who the mighty spoil bore off from this in the supernal circle. Upon all sides the deep and loathsome valley trembled so that I thought the universe was thrilled with love, by which there are who think. The world oft times converted into chaos, and at that moment this primeval crag, both here and elsewhere, made such overthrow. But fix your eyes below, for draweth near the river of blood, within which boiling is whoever by violence doth injure others. O blind cupidity, O wrath insane, that spurs us onward so in our short life, and in the eternal then so badly steeps us. I saw an ample moat, bent like a bow, as one which all the plain encompasses, conformable to what my guide had said. And between this and the embankment's foot, centaurs in file were running, armed with arrows, as in the world they used to chase, to follow. Beholding us descend, each one stood still, and from the squadron 3 detached themselves, with bows and arrows in advance selected. And from afar one cried, On to what torment come ye, who down the hillside are descending? Tell us from there, if not I draw the bow. And my master said, Our answer will we make to Chiron, near you there, in evil hour, that will of thine, so evermore so hasty. Then touched he me and said, This one is Nessus, who perished for the lovely Deianira, and for himself did vengeance take. And he, in the midst, who at his breast is gazing, is the great Chiron, who brought up Achilles. That other Pholus is, who was so wrathful. Thousands and thousands go about the moat, shouting with shafts whatever soul emerges out of the blood, more than his crime allots. Near we approached unto those monsters' fleet. Chiron an arrow took, and with the notch backward upon his jaws he put his beard. After he had uncovered this great mouth, he said to his companions, Are you ware that he behind moveth whatever he touches? Thus are not wont to do the feet of dead men. And my good guide, who now was at his breast, where the 2 natures are together joined, replied, Indeed he lives, and thus alone me it behooves to show him the dark valley. Necessity and not delight impels us. Someone withdrew from singing Hallelujah, who unto me committed this new office. No thief is he, nor I a thievish spirit. But by that virtue through which I am moving my steps along this savage thoroughfare, give us some one of thine to be with us, and who may show us where to pass the ford, and who may carry this one on his back, for 'tis no spirit that can walk in the air. Upon his right breast Chiron wheeled about and said to Nessus, Turn, and do thou guide them, and warn aside if any other band may meet you. We, with our faithful escort, onward moved, along the brink of the vermilion boiling, wherein the boiled were uttering loud laments. People I saw within up to the eyebrows, and the great centaur said, Tyrants are these, who dealt in bloodshed and in pillaging. Here they lament their pitiless mischiefs. Here is Alexander, the fierce Dionysus, who upon Sicily brought dolorous years. That forehead there, which has the hair so black, is Azalin, and the other, who is blond, Obizo of Este, who, in truth, up in the world was by his stepson slain. Then turned I to the poet, and he said, Now he be first of thee, and second I. A little further on the centaur stopped, above a folk who, far down as the throat, seemed from that boiling stream to issue forth. A shade he showed us on one side alone, saying, He cleft asunder in God's bosom the heart that still upon the Thames is honored. Then people saw I, who from out the river lifted their heads, and also all the chest, and many among these I recognized. Thus ever more and more grew shallower that blood, so that the feet alone it covered, and there, across the moat, our passage was. Even as thou here upon this side beholdest the boiling stream that aye diminishes, the centaur said, I wish thee to believe that on this other more and more declines its bed until it reunites itself, where it behoveth tyranny to groan, justice divine upon this side is goading at Attila, who was a scourge on the earth, and Pyrrhus and Sextus, and forever milks the tears with which the boiling it unseals, and Renier de Coroneto, and Renier Pazzo, who made upon the highways so much war. Then back he turned, and passed again the ford. And so ends Canto 12, and this is where we're going to start wrapping things up. Again, this is a wonderful allegory, right? It is saying that you should absolutely not deal in blood. You should absolutely not be a tyrant. You should absolutely not make your life the death of others, or else you might face some type of eternal punishment. It's a wonderful allegory. I don't particularly hold the belief that if you are a tyrant, that you're going to be drowned in blood. It could be. I could be wrong. I always hold the possibility that I'm wrong, but I don't think so. I think that our purpose here is different. I think that the people who deal in blood have failed the lesson, and they will have to learn the lesson again, and it will be tougher the next time. I think that the goal is to resist the spilling of blood, the violence and the hatred that comes with that, the venting of the anger, the imbalance in your life that requires you to strike out in anger against someone else. I think that it is possible to believe that and not believe in the eternal damnation of the soul by being drowned in blood. Some people believe that it's not being drowned in blood, it's being burned alive for the rest of your life in torment and anguish. And okay, if that's what you want to believe, I think that you will be disabused by that when you get to the other side. I don't say that idly. I know I don't talk about it a lot, but I have been separated from the mortal coil. I have made the choice to get back into this body. I have. I have been separated involuntarily and separated myself voluntarily. I have squeezed my soul back into the meat suit. I have been there, so I do speak with a little bit of understanding that some other people don't. But the tendency is that people who have had an experience similar to mine somehow all wind up with remarkably similar ideas about the afterlife, and none of it involves the things that are put into writing here. This spell no longer holds the power that it once did. It is no longer read as much as it once was. It does not hold the power that was invested in 1300 BC, or AD, not BC. A lot of time and understanding has passed since the writing of these cantos. There's a lot of things that have changed since then. The complete understanding of religion on the planet has changed, right? This was just shortly after the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic schism, the East-West split. But a couple hundred years after this, we get the Protestant Reformation. And that completely changes the landscape again. Everybody has completely different ideas about what hell is and what heaven is and how the journey plays out. I'm going to break it down to you as simply as I possibly can. God is. God is everything. God is me. God is you. God is the space between me and you, and God is the space between me and you. God is eternal, but so is your soul. I believe that your soul is an individualized fragment of the divine, not divine in and of itself. You are not God. You are a piece of God. You are endowed with the powers of creation by the Creator at creation to serve creation. You can indeed, through faith, speak things into existence. You probably can cast a mountain into the ocean, although I personally would not even attempt it. Even if I was fully capable and thought for absolute sure that I could do it, I would not do it because of the consequences of it, right? There has to be a reason to do the things that are to be done. But they can be. I do believe that you are an individualized reflection of God, that it resides within the meat suit, and that the Holy Spirit itself is the part that allows all of the things to happen. It's the part that keeps you breathing and keeps your heart pumping. It's the part that regulates your temperature and tells you when you're hungry, right? All of that is the Spirit in action. It is time in motion. It is not the meat suit, and it's not the decision maker, but it is the becoming that is. God put you here so that you can learn lessons. Some people don't like that saying, right? Well, God doesn't need to learn lessons. But God is eternal. God is so eternal that he cannot conceive grief in and of himself. There is no going of death to God, right? When you die, you return to God, and it's up to him to decide what to do with you. There is no grief for him when you die. But through you, he can experience the anguish that is grief of losing someone so very vital to your existence. Someone that has been there for your entire life when you lose a parent, or someone you had invested your life in, if it's a spouse or a friend. You can experience the exquisite anguish that is grief. And that's something that God put you here to experience. You're here for the experience of the good and the bad. Grief is not necessarily bad. It is a longing of the soul for the return to what once was, but it will be again. This is a long way of saying that nobody had to die for you to be forgiven for your sins. God wants you to choose not to sin. He's not trying to take the ability to drink alcohol from you. He's trying to take the drunkenness from you. He's not trying to take the ability to have pleasurable sexual relations from you. He's taking the lustfulness from you. And there is a big difference there. It's not about holding you down. It is about refining you into the best thing that you can possibly be. To be the tool that God created you to be. To fully embrace all of the experiences with the knowledge that one day you will be reunited and that there's not 7 circles of hell waiting for you. If you have been angry and you have struck out in anger, even to the point where you have taken a life, you can be forgiven for that. All it ever takes is for you to ask for it. You don't have to walk down an aisle. You don't have to be washed in no blood. You don't have to say a specific prayer. I have one I use all the time, and we've already said it once, but we're going to do it again. If you go to God and you say, God, I come to you as a sinner, and I ask you to forgive my sins, it's already done. But then you can add on some more, right? I freely accept the grace that you freely extend to me, and I ask you to change my life. And if you do that, he will. If you mean it, it already happened. You don't have to accept nobody else's sacrifice for that. God wants you, not blood. God wants you, not acts. He wants your heart to genuinely change for him. And it's better that way. It's hard. It's really hard when you grew up listening to the rules. And the rules are there to remind you of what's right. But if you are seeking God's face and you have asked for his forgiveness and you have asked him to change your life, then the law is written here. You feel it here every single time you tell a lie. You feel it here anytime that you even contemplate stealing from somebody. You feel it here. It is written on your heart chakra. And that engraving changes the whole spectrum of everything else. That's where we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay them, but it is not intentional, and I do not apologize for it. I am put here. My purpose here is to clear away the ruins that are keeping you from finding the truth that is the Lord God Almighty himself, with no intermediary necessary. And I stand on that 10 toes down. I am both feet planted ready. That is what I stand on. Hopefully, I brought a little bit of that to you. If you like what I'm doing here, let me know down below. Hit me with a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. Let me know you appreciate it. Let me know you don't appreciate it. We can disagree as long as it's respectful. I won't have to block you. If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with the super thanks. It will be greatly appreciated. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.